Hey yo, it's your boy Agent Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew, the usual suspects. We got Anthony Spiggs, we got Dean or Alpha Dean, and today we have Marlowe House. So Dean, can you tell us a little bit about them?
All right. We got Monica Marlowe and her husband Angels. I'm going to say a couple of things about her, but I'm going to let them tell you all the meaty good stuff as we get into everything. Monica Marlowe was the 2015 RPG Superstar winner. I mean, that's huge. Not only that, but her husband was a semifinalist as well. They do gaming materials and publishing for various different companies. They're very big with Pathfinder, of course, winning that. Green Ronin, Cypher Caster, Wright Publishing. And this married couple also has a successful Twitch and YouTube channels as well called Marlowe House. So without further ado, Monica, Andrew, how's it going? And tell us about yourselves.
Hello, I'm Andrew Marlowe.
And I'm Monica Marlowe. Welcome to Marlowe House Presents.
They said it!
Interview over. Cut.
Thanks, everybody. We'll be here all night.
First off, welcome. We're so happy to have you guys here. This is totally awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Our first question is going to be the obvious one. What exactly is Marlowe House, and what's your guys' role in the company?
Well, so Marlowe House is the name that was sort of tagged on us by some of our other freelancing friends when we would be, when they'd be talking about things involving either one of us. They'd
right.
be, it's Marlowe House. and so it's sort of this blanket way of identifying us, and we just embraced it. We went out and got ourselves a logo. And
a bunch of recording equipment.
Well, that was later.
Yeah,
but so it started off as just sort of the branding that we have for our freelance efforts, and then it's kind of blossomed into this Twitch and YouTube actual plays and advice and all sorts of crazy stuff.
I mean, we blog. Well, Andrew still blogs, and I'm currently on hiatus at No Direction, but we blogged there, and it was just Marlowe House was just an easier way of saying Andrew and Monica. Marlowe House is
right.
an easier thing to talk about. But also our kids are very talented, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we ended up doing would be inclusive to them. And so actually you can't really probably see our logos, but it's a Baba Yaga house with standing on a die.
I don't think
you can really see it very well. But and it's got a 4. It's a D20. It's standing on a D20, but the 4 is showing because there's 4. And so that was a conscientious decision. Most times when you brand with dice, the 20 is always showing on a D20, but
or a 1.
Or a 1, yeah. Well, or if I roll it, a 1's showing. 4 is usually a good night. But that was an active choice to represent that Marlowe House was all of us, because even though our kids they're not really
currently involved.
Yeah, they're not currently involved, but they both have some talents that we think.
Yeah.
Well,
they're always welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Do they game?
They do kind of.
A little bit. Mostly, they're more interested in board games and card games and RPGs.
Mm-hmm. And we have role played with them, and we've had some really
good games.
We've had some really good games. Our kids are both very creative, and they both like stories and stuff like that. So it's just, unfortunately, finding time to game with your kids when you game on Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night with your adult friends, finding a good time to game with your children, that it's easier to play card games and board games because it's faster.
And it is what they appreciate more.
Yeah, and they do enjoy that because then they can beat us. Our son is ridiculously clever when it comes to games. He usually beats.
Yeah, he's actually pretty good. He likes Dominion a lot, and we play that. We also like some of the cooperative games, and he's very good with those. So, I mean, frighteningly so some nights.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we broke down the history of Marlowe House, let's move a little forward here. So you guys have a
Okay.
history with Paizo and Pathfinder among other companies. Can you tell us about your experience with the RPG Superstar and how it was designing for a competitive design competition?
I have PTSD.
So they launched that in.
Well, there were 9 of them.
There were.
So they launched it.
They launched it a
right
while
on
ago.
They launched it almost right on
the release
of Pathfinder.
The very first one was still a 3.5, and I entered a couple of times, and it was one of those things we enjoyed it, and then I actually placed in the competition. At which point you discover that it's a meat grinder.
Oh yeah, it's brutal.
It is, and I did that not once but twice, and then I convinced Monica to do it when they changed up the rules a little bit.
Right.
She didn't like.
So my role in RPG Superstar for the first 7 years was to cheerlead everybody, especially when Andrew placed. It was the only form that I participated in on Paizo, and I specifically said that I would never enter it because I didn't want to win it. And the first round every year prior to the year that I entered was to create a wondrous item. And my style of gameplay, I never used wondrous items. I had no idea what wondrous items were, what was out there, what was available, where there were holes, where we needed to fill. And you kind of have to know that about the game before you can create something, because you have to create something new. So I didn't know where the blind spots were. So I never felt like that was something I could do. Andrew did place, he placed twice in the top 16 both times. But so the year before, he had decided that he just wasn't going. He'd gotten moving by placing twice. He started getting his freelance career moving. And the reason that I supported it was because it was always his dream to be a freelance writer. And it was not my dream to be a freelance game designer. That wasn't where I thought my path led. And but that in 2015, they changed over the first round to magic item or magic weapons, rods, rings, and staves. And I was like, oh, well, I know where we have a great big hole in weapons, and so I'm going to create this thing. And so I did. But by that time, I'd already established myself in the freelance circles, and everybody was like, you should enter. And I'm like, no, I don't want to enter. I don't what I want to. It was the only round of 5 rounds that I did not have a trifecta of the 3 judges recommending me to go on. Liz Quartz, who I will not hold this against her, is the only person who said, I don't recommend this item. But yeah, well, she wasn't wrong. Her reasoning was that I didn't use the right spell, but I didn't actually know that the spell she thought I should use actually existed, because I like the core rule books.
It was something that showed up in a later book, and she just didn't see it. There was a better spell.
Yeah, there was a better spell. But I didn't.
But that's the kind of thing a developer can find and fix. But that's the kind of meat grinder that RPG Superstar was. You would have all these like really nitpicky things that would come up, and it was actually one of my really good friends that when I was in, who was like, I can't recommend him to go on. It was like the first one of the first ones that came back with a no on my on one of my entries, and he gave a lot of reasons. And I was like, you know what, Steve's right. That's perfectly legit. But they really, especially to get deeper in and watching the results year after year, it gets really, really hard to pick. And so they get really fine-tooth comb as to what's going to make it through.
Yeah.
Now,
So
Monica, real quick, before we go forward, we're talking about this item. For those out there in the world who didn't follow it and everything, what was the item?
so I always played the cleric, and clerics are one of the few classes that can interact with ghosts and undead and stuff like that by channeling positive energy. And we had just played in an awful combat where I was the only one who could do any damage. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I have like 5 other people here who can do damage, but they can't touch anything because it's all incorporeal. So I created, I can't remember what it was called. It was
too many.
It was like a ghost, but it was like but what it did was if it was used by a cleric or someone who could channel positive energy, they could channel into it, and then when they hit incorporeal creatures, it made them it basically made them corporeal to your allies who weren't using magical items. So I honestly I don't really remember the exact details of it. Like Andrew said, I mean, it's been about 4 years since I wrote it. But basically what it did was it opened up ghosts and haunts to be susceptible to other members of the party. It was a little on the expensive side too. I mean, it wasn't a cheap item to make or to buy. But, at that point, if you were in a situation and you had such an item as treasure or whatever, it certainly wouldn't have been something I would have given up.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I could definitely see that being a weapon that most clerics are, or any be useful for everyone to. It helps the entire party, not just the individual player.
Right. And that
was the fun part of it.
Well, and that was actually the reason why they supported the other 2 judges. Well, and even Liz supported the rationale behind it, but it didn't have. I used Ghost Touch, I think. No, I didn't use that. But Ghost Dirge is a better.
Ghostbane Dirge.
Ghostbane Dirge was the spell she thought I should have used. But I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. I think I used Ghost Touch because, see, I'm a firm believer that if you can't just find what you need in the core rule books, then you're just trying too hard. I'm really here. Like, I don't like if I have to use my sheet, something's gone terribly wrong. I like the role playing, not the role playing of games. So
we definitely can agree with that. And, so that being said, as game designers for crunchier, more rules intensive, games and systems like Pathfinder, what do you think is the biggest difference between designing for them and designing for a game like Cypher?
Math. I mean, like that was probably the hardest part about RPG Superstar is that I didn't know anything about designing anything. I didn't know how to make a monster, and I had to make a monster. I didn't know how to make a weapon. I had to make a weapon. I didn't know how to design the levels for encounters, and I had to create an encounter. And then I had to write an adventure pitch in which I had to come up with another monster, and I had to detail out some other things, and I ended up creating sort of like an air combat system because I wanted to be able to fly, giant bat creatures into the bad guy's lair because that was cool. So like those were all things I didn't know, and to be fair, I was lucky I didn't have a job at the time, and so I ended up basically boot camping 101 all of the game design for 60 to 80 hours a week for like the entire 6 to 8 week run of RPG Superstar.
So one of the big differences for me between Cypher and something like Pathfinder is that everything in Pathfinder is detailed. If there is a rule for it, the GM needs to have that rule come from a source book. Cypher, on the other hand, allows the GMs to make those calls themselves. And so when you're writing rules that are not necessarily less crunchy, but the crunch is different. It's not
It's more streamlined.
It is a little bit more streamlined, and it is definitely a different way of doing it. You don't have to worry about number crunching all the math because Cypher has pretty much one set of math. You don't have to worry about balancing
the hit points versus their AC,
right?
versus
Because when you're looking at a stat
and...
block in Pathfinder, it's this long, and every time you tweak something, everything else cascade changes.
Yes.
So when you make a small change, you end up with big changes elsewhere. And so getting all those little fine dials tuned to the right spots in Cypher, you don't have to do that. So if I'm designing something in Cypher, and I've done a number of monsters and things that you just kind of go through and you figure out where you want what to be. You assign the level and you say, you know what, I think this needs to be a little harder. You bump the level for this ability, and you bump the level down for that ability.
And it needs to be a little faster, but it won't have as much armor.
And so like monster design, super easy.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I find most alike is when you're designing something like when you're tweaking the types and you're designing the abilities for types. That's a lot like designing feats in Pathfinder. They're not tremendously different skill sets. The biggest difference is that you don't have to wade through 20 plus years of already written content to get to what you want to do.
And because the beauty of Cypher system. There was an article by Charles Ryan, and he just said in that article, the rules are written for the players, not the GM.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
I wrote a Pathfinder scenario right after I wrote my complete adventure, and I ran the scenario. I didn't run it at Gen Con, but I ran a couple of things. I ran Cypher at Gen Con or Numenera, but I had run the Pathfinder scenario at a couple of Pathfinder events. So I knew it pretty well, and I was going to run a game for the Contessa on Thursday night, and I was like, well, I really don't want to run the same games I've been running for other things. I want to run something different. Well, I knew my Pathfinder scenario well enough that literally on a cocktail napkin, I wrote down, these were the monsters that you encounter. They're approximately this level, and then I just told this entire game from hike. And when I talk about, when people ask me about monsters and Cypher system, I'm like, yeah, they're like haikus. I mean, they do write out big pages, but honestly, everything you need could fit into a haiku. And makes it very elegant. So if you're running something on the fly and you sit down, you can just kind of make stuff up as you're going along, and it makes sense. If it's a level 5, it's got 15 hit points, unless you think it needs to be bigger. Then it's got a little bit more strength, or a little bit more might. Really is in everything. But
I love it. It's awesome.
Is there a rule? This isn't part of our questions, but just hearing you guys talk made me think of this. Is there a rule in the Cypher system that you wish was added in, like some crunch that is needed?
Not really.
I think
I haven't come across anything that I've been like, I really need this rule.
No, because you can just make it up on your own. I mean, if it feels like you need it, if it feels like you need it at the table, just be like, this is what's going to happen.
Actually, I'm going to take that back.
Oh,
I don't know that this is necessarily the case, because I haven't had a chance to read it, but I just got a copy of Shadow of the Beanstalk for Genesis. And one of the things I'm very excited about this particular book for Genesis is that they have rules for favors and debts that you owe, because it's a cyberpunk setting. Mm-hmm. You owe debts to people owe debts to you, and they have a favor system. And I'm going to look at it, and I might crib a lot of that for my own use in Cypher.
Which is kind of like fame and stuff like that in Pathfinder.
Right. Well, actually, it's actually more like boons and vampire.
Oh, okay.
it's a lot like that where you've got
like a status system.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's so.
I mean, that's really interesting.
Yeah, but I think it could be done in Cypher easily.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could just build it as a, another form of an asset deck or something. Built-in asset for the or built-in hindrance, depending
Right.
on.
Well, the idea behind it is that if you like you're running short of cash, but you need this augment or you need this particular device to do your heist or whatever that you're going to be doing, and so you see the guy and you're like, here's what I've got, I'll owe you one, and the guy's like, okay, and then later on he turns around and he calls in, so it's almost more like an intrusion thing.
You
can burn it like
intrusion.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's
so
not
it's
an
like
intrusion
reverse.
when you owe a debt to is like ring. I need you to off
And
this
by the
way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a player intrusion that comes back on them at some other point.
Yes.
That's a really good way. That would be a really good way.
It sounds a little bit like
game.
it's like a mix between Idolized by Millions and the Doom Foci. Like one, like one gives you automatic help because all these people idolize you and you get assets and you could call upon friendly allies, and the other one gives free GM intrusions to the GM.
Mm-hmm. I do kind of like that kind of push-pull mechanic.
Yes.
There's a lot of games that have that, and it's one of the things I really like about a lot of the narrative games. And Cypher has a bit of it because we do the intrusions, and it kind of works like a push-pull. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough.
That works. See, look at this. What's really this is a great interview and a bad one all at the same time.
Why?
Because you've got 5 game creators, and we're going to it's going to turn into like, oh, wait a minute, let's design this.
Yeah, I know. No, he just said that, and I know what our Friday night game's going to be like for a while, and I'm like, oh, we definitely need to use that for the Friday night game. Well, and it's really funny because I really don't think of myself as a game designer. I mean, I went through all of that stuff, and I really, I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about having PTSD because I really don't. But at the same time, every person who's ever gotten into the like upper levels of RPG Superstar, like it is a survivor's club. I mean, when we get together, like there are things that we couldn't talk about. Like we had to listen to thousands of people's unsolicited opinions about our stuff, and like people would ask the dumbest things. Like I had to draw a map, and I built a manor house underground, and
it's an awesome map.
Oh, Andrew actually he printed it out. He got me a copy printed.
It actually made it into the module so close and unchanged that there was actually a eraser mark that didn't leave that the artist managed to keep in.
Yeah, I mean, like,
awesome.
Like they just inked it. It's an old school style, very very like a very architectural drawing, but it was built by a dwarf, so of course it was very it
looked like a battle axe.
Yeah, it was. And the actual the foundational part of it was I wanted an amphitheater in it because I wanted this to be a retired dwarf who really enjoyed basically telling her in stories of triumph and stuff like that. So the amphitheater's curved wall became the curved edge of one of the double-sided battle axes. But someone was like, yeah, you got all this stuff, but then there's this dungeon in the basement. Where's the kitchen? I'm like, you idiot, that is the kitchen. I mean, like it's a black and white. It's a black and white map. I was gonna try to color it, and the color that I put in it didn't look right, and so I just kind of left. I was just stopped because I was like, I will mar this map of beauty. They're like, where's the bathrooms? I'm like, have you never heard of a chamber pot? There were cabinets in every bedroom, and I was like, what do you? Well, it's a chamber pot. You put it in the dresser that's there next to the bed. And there's actually even a garbage, well, like there's a runoff. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this guy went on about like how bad this map was because there was this torture chamber.
Strange torture chamber and no bathroom.
Yeah, I was just like, are
He
you
probably
high? It was bizarre. But, well, and then, so every time someone would, and it was really hard because I had become such good friends with a lot of the designers from before. So they would try to come to my rescue, but they had to be careful because they couldn't be seen as answering for me. So yeah, so I had to. So I could talk to
they weren't
everybody.
Judges, right? But
No.
But they still had to be very careful because
some of them
you don't want to come
known
across as you know too much.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know it, right?
Yeah.
Because people know we're friends, and so they can't respond like they know too much because we might have told them something.
Right. It was very isolating. It was incredibly hard because all the people that I had talked to up until that point, I couldn't talk to anymore. Like there were only like 2 or 3 people that I would share my stuff with just as a second, like a proofreading, like, just to make sure that my language actually made sense. And there was just a couple of them because I had to be careful because I couldn't have it look, and they were very careful. They were like, well, I think you should rework this, but I can't tell you how or why, because then it becomes my design. So, so then I had to go back and I had to look at what they were they were saying, and then try to figure out how to make it better in my own way.
And that's actually one of those time-honored traditions of RPG Superstar. And it's really funny when the people that you talk to most frequently about that end up in the competition with you.
Mm-hmm.
So for my last run at it, I was sharing my design with one of the other contestants, and he was sharing his design with me, and we were still saying, yeah, your text is good here, your map needs help, fix this, and talking to one another about what we were doing.
Yeah, those are the only people you really can talk to.
They're the only ones who really get it.
Yeah, at that point, it's just incredibly isolating. I was actually sad that I won because there was another contestant, Chris Wasco, who I'd become very close friends with because he was one of the only 3 people I could talk to. And when I met him at PaizoCon, I actually cried because I was so happy to meet him in real life, in real person meet space. But I was also really apologetic because I beat him and I wanted him to win. So
I could only imagine how stressful that must have been.
I cried. I knew Owen Casey Stevens beforehand, and he was the MC of it.
Yeah, because he was my first publisher.
Yeah, he was, and his wife. I know his wife too, and she's like, "Can I call you when they make the announcement?" Because I was like, at that point, I'm sleep deprived. I've learned a whole new set of skills and a new career, and and I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And she's talking to me on the phone, and I'm hitting refresh on my computer, I haven't figured out what's going on. And Owen gets on the phone and he says, "It's about to go live. I want you to know that you won. You brought the best pitch." And I just lost it. I was mad at him. I was happy. I was in tears. I was I didn't know what to do. I was on the phone and my whole family thought I was being murdered or something. It was emotional.
As you guys are, a married couple of game designers, which is kind of rare to begin with, do you guys bounce ideas off each other?
All the time.
What's your creative process when designing stuff?
Yelling at each other.
Well, it depends. It depends. If in the case of our there was a lot of yelling at each other. Because we did write a short story for The Awakened.
Yeah, for
Isle
Samurai Sheepdog.
Which just finished a successful Kickstarter. But yeah, we did a lot of bickering on that one. But a lot of times it's just, hey, what do you think of this idea? And we'll start talking, and we live in each other's headspace. We've been together now for longer than I'm going to mention on air. And
longer than we've known Scott. So,
yeah.
Or not quite, but yeah.
But
Well, just tell us.
Well, this year will be our 19th wedding anniversary, but we have been a couple a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But we've known each other.
And we've
But
known
we've known each
longer.
other.
Yeah.
So when we wrote this short story, we were approached by Hal Greenberg, who we actually had on our show, and we talked about it then. And he's like, I really want to write this story, but I've injured my hand and I have carpal tunnel, and I've just literally met you here at this dinner at Gen Con, but I think you will write this story very well. So I wanted to.
It's a story about a married couple, and you're exactly the married couple I want.
Like, okay.
Then.
I mean, so I wrote the first draft with some parts left out because I didn't know where we wanted to go, but I was really intrigued with the story.
We had certain specs to follow, so like the very opening scene was pretty much preset. The very end scene was preset, and then there were some notes to follow going through the middle. But other than that,
actually, I don't think the end scene was preset so much as it. Oh, I thought that we. Oh, okay, you're right. It's been a while since we wrote that story too.
We retweaked it a little bit and sent it to him and said, "This is how it's ending."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, that's perfect." But
so we did that on Google Docs actually. So I wrote up the first draft and I shared it with him. And then there were times when he would be writing at the top and I would be writing at the bottom, and it would be moving as we were both working on it. And I would go back and look at what he was doing, and I'd be like, why did you change that again? And he'd be like, why did you change it back again? And so there were some times when we were like,
that got a little heated a couple of times.
Yeah. So
I like the way that sounds.
And I said,
it's not right.
It was awful. It sounded terrible, but I let him keep it because, happy husband, happy home, or something like that. No, but
you guys sound like the perfect marriage.
But it is weird. Like when we were writing blogs, we would write our blogs independently of each other. And one day, Ryan Costello was like, "Hey, did you guys know that your blogs are usually about the same thing on the same?"
We're like,
no. He's like, it's so cute. You guys are so adorable. But it's because we share things with each other, and so we have a lot of times that we try to communicate, outside of gaming. But we game with each other 2-3 times a week. So
twice.
At least twice.
Yeah. Depending.
But one of us will hear something neat and we'll share it, and so then that starts the wheels turning, and then and it's always in the shower. Like one of us will be in the shower and we'll get out of the shower and we'll be like, hey honey, what about this? And I'll be like, that's great.
I fixed it.
Yeah, because that'll be something that, like, because we talk about our actual play, like we don't really hard plan it out, but we like to have a good idea of what some of the big strokes are going to be, so that when we sit down, we can kind of help to craft that story more organically, but also in the way that we kind of want it to go. We don't do that with our regular off-air game.
Although we haven't actually done that for any of the ones that we're currently doing. We did that for some of the ones that never managed to meet the airwaves, but we didn't do that for.
But we also co-created the settings, the new setting and the last setting. So
yeah, we did like a
setting 0,
a setting mashup live on air with the audience.
Oh, that's nice.
Twice.
Mm-hmm.
You could always release a lost tape series and play.
I was thinking about that.
We've thought about it. But the audio on this is so bad.
The only way we would do that is if we released it to our Patreon patrons, so that they could hear what we went through. We've gone through 4 or 5 audio recording setups. We currently actually have 3 complete sets of mics to use, at any given time. I mean, we could have a band down here, and we would not be hurting for
We'd
sound.
We'd still have extra mics. We've got more mics than we have jacks on the soundboard.
Well, we ran into problems because nobody ever talks about how they do sound recording of actual play groups that are actually in the same place. Glass Cannon does it, but they don't talk about so much what they do. I mean, we bought a soundboard. We bought a smaller soundboard, and it didn't have enough jack settings. I mean, so we have like near professional size like soundboard. It's got 6 jacks. I thought about going higher, but we don't have enough seats at the table for a bigger soundboard anyway. But we could currently mic 10 people on XLR styled 11. We have 11.
That's
We have
awesome.
11 mics, and we only have 6 jacks, and then we have 2 Yetis. So we have.
Although one Yeti is currently out of the state.
Oh, that's right, because you loaned it to Andrew. So we have 2 sets. We have a set of 6 that we could use. We have a set of the 4. The ones we're using right now, we only have 4 because they were expensive. And then I have one off mic that I bought because I bought it for the style but it turned out to be a really good mic. Who knew?
I do the
It's
same
a really
thing
cheap
too.
mic she bought for cosplay that actually turned out to be rated for really good audio.
Yeah.
And we've actually used it a couple of times, and it's got really good audio.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great.
But yeah, so we just talked about a little bit about how you guys go through your creative process with one another. But do you have any advice for our listeners who might be budding game designers and are looking to break into the industry?
Just do it. Start blogging now. Don't be afraid to jump in. This is actually one of the things that I quite a bit on my own blog. Mostly I talk about just doing things for your home game, but the same advice applies. Just get out there and start doing things. Put it out there in a place where people can see it, and get yourself some business cards. Once you've got a pretty good resume of things that you can show off, and go talk to people at conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't hit them up when they're trying to drink at the bar and they're
Unless you're buying the drink for them.
But
if you buy me a drink,
most of the time, a lot of the designers and whatnot, they can at least direct you to where and when to talk to them and how to best get a hold of them. And you do that on like the floor, but not while they're trying to sell something to somebody else.
Yeah,
it's a delicate dance. Don't throw yourself in front of them and expect them to pay total attention to you. There's a lot going on at conventions, but it is a good place to network. The other thing you can do is a lot of the designers have social media pages. You can get a hold of them and start talking to them as part of their audience. And you never know what might come of just being there in the audience where they have a name that they can want to put their face to. Just don't be a jerk.
Yeah, I was going to say, so there are a couple things that I learned from watching, and I would say the most important thing you can do is to find that you admire the most and understand, first of all, that they're humans and that they will say things that you won't agree with. And there are appropriate ways to respond to that, and there are inappropriate ways to respond to that. But really what you should be doing is watching what they're doing, listening to what they're saying, and trying to glean from and to surround yourself with the people that you want to be like, because then you will start to see where the level you're at is and where the level they're at is, and you can start to kind of build yourself up. You do have to have a body of work, because otherwise nobody's going to. I mean, no one's going to hire someone who's never written anything. There was something you were talking about, and I was gonna. So Andrew's his blog is Burst of Insight, and mine was Inspire Confidence. And so my blog is still available on No Direction. It's just currently in hiatus. And I never write anything crunchy. I almost never write anything that involves creating monsters. There are other really great bloggers on that site who do that much better than I do. But what I write about is community building, because the most important thing about gaming is that it's a community, and so you need to be part of that community. And you need to realize that there's always somebody who's going to be better than you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't try. And that more importantly, that you put yourself out there. Volunteering at conventions to run games is a really great way to meet people that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily get a chance to meet with. Listening more than you talk, not at all like what I'm doing right now, because I love to talk. But if there's like going to be a meet and greet, go to it. Right. I mean, that's where you're going to meet people who are doing what you're doing.
Right. And for the Cypher audience, you've got the creator program, so you can publish for yourself through the creator program. That's a good way to get your body of work out there where people can find it and can see it, and will pay you money for it without the need of going through a publisher. And if you get a good body of work and you're turning things over and making a little bit of money on the side for it, you'll probably catch some notice. You can also, Cyphercaster is a good place to get started. A lot of the fan magazines, if you play multiple games and you're doing Pathfinder at all, they have Wayfinder, which is another fan-based e-magazine that does get a print version when they do PaizoCon, and you can submit to that. They have submission guidelines that go up.
What's the one at Right Publishing?
That is Pathways.
Yeah, Pathways. They publish.
They do some 5e now, I think, in there too.
Yeah, I can't believe that they don't, given that Steven and
well, I think Pathways includes 5e content, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
Yeah. But I mean, WotC undoubtedly has something that you can do.
WotC has their creator program, which is again run through drive-through, and you can post stuff on there. Just make sure that whenever you're doing things like that, that you follow whatever the community guidelines are.
Right.
Yes, important.
If you're writing for Pathfinder, make sure you're not only following the community guidelines, including a section 15.
Oh, section 15.
Make sure you're hitting all the requirements for the legal requirements for citing, basically all the
materials.
Yeah, it's the open game license requirements. But these are all these are all different resources and places that people can go do it. And my best recommendation is just get out there and do it.
I know what I was going to say. So the one thing that I found most valuable was to go back through the previous year's judges' conversations on and their observations on previous entries. And I always read the ones that didn't get to go forward, because the people who were doing it right were doing it right. And I couldn't do it right like they did. I had to figure out the things that everybody was doing wrong so that I didn't make those same mistakes. So, find places where you can see where people talk about critiques, and don't take it personally. I mean, honestly, even though somebody was like, well, where's the toilet in this castle? I mean, that wasn't my failing. You should be modest. Not like me at all. But to listen to what people say. I mean, if they say, hey, maybe your grammar's not so great, you need to maybe get yourself an editor. Or, this doesn't flow very well. This isn't the way a stat block's supposed to look. You have to put the work in. It's not easy. Nobody accidentally falls into the first round of RPG Superstar and wins the first time out.
Do what you do.
But I'm not kidding. I worked 60 to 80 hours a week on that. I mean, it was not because I just happened to be very good at it. I wasn't. I knew nothing, Jon Snow.
No matter how you did it, you did it, and that is an accomplishment in of itself.
Yeah.
And the other thing I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome. You have always been very forthcoming with the encouragement, and truly, I wrote my first supplements for Cypher because of you at Gen Con.
Oh, no way. Oh,
My
I'm
first-
so glad.
The first 2 supplements, they're out there. People are buying it. The guys
And if
tell
I
me-
can do it, anybody can do it. I mean, I'm the
just
most
saying,
reluctant game designer ever.
it's just good. It's just good that and I'm saying that to let everybody out there in the ether know, all you Cypher heads and everything. They're telling you the truth. You got to just kind of take the plunge. I was always reluctant. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. I did it, and the feedback was awesome. So, it can be done.
Yeah, I always thought for the longest time that I was designing stuff for my home games. I was always like, yeah, but I'm not professional quality, and
then actual
spent a lot of
play
time
started to happen.
I actually kept shooting myself in the foot. I really think if I had actually gone out when I was in my 20s and been releasing things to Dungeon and Dragon magazine, which were at the time was about the only way to get into the industry, that was easily accessible in general. I think I would have started a lot sooner.
But then we wouldn't be married, so.
Oh, that's a
We might
perfect
be.
wife thing to say.
Well, no, I
But
mean, because he would have gone a different path, and it's impossible to know where that would have led him. So
He
If
would
I'd
have
been
been,
out of the city.
he would have been hanging out with Gary Gygax in his mansion in Los Angeles. Remember
But see, those things,
the Gygax late years.
those things happen. But you know what? If you're meant to be together, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole nother story I have to tell you guys. But talking about all this, talking about the game designs and all this, but you guys have just ventured into a new realm with Twitch and YouTube. You got actual plays going on. So, what's the difference? What's the dynamics of actual plays versus regular old home game sitting around a table?
So our first runs at actual play, we tried to record them without broadcasting them, and we were doing a lot of sound editing, and then we ended up doing a live broadcast. We want something, I forget exactly which one it was, but we ended up doing something live, I think, or we recorded it, and so editing wasn't very good. And I said
that was the Extra Life.
Right. Oh, yeah. So we did Extra Life. We ran a game on Extra Life to raise money, and so it was live. And after we did it, I said to Andrew, I said, you know what? I think we need to do all of our games live because we belabor getting it perfect rather than making it fun. And so that was the last time we recorded stuff that we planned to do any kind of audio editing on, and everything you see is mostly unedited.
Currently, it's mostly unedited. There's a plan to do some things that we will go back in and we will actually edit, mostly just to get it closer to time. And we're going to play it like we always do, but instead of... because when we did the first time, we were trying to get everything just right. Everything had to be just right. And there were times when Monica would be sitting with the headset on, and she couldn't quite hear what you said. So say all that again. And it was a lot harder, and it didn't come off very
natural
organic. A lot of times. Other times we did hit very organic, and it was hilarious. But really, the biggest thing that we found is that now that we're running them live on Twitch, there isn't a huge difference between what we do on our Sunday game with our regular friends and what we do on a live stream. The biggest difference is that we have an audience and we interact with our audience.
Yeah, actually, our audience is sort of like our fourth player. I mean, they throw things out, and if we catch it and we can incorporate it. But on our live stream, one of our boxes is actually the chat. The chat screen, so that the chat room, so that everybody can see what's being said, because we're interacting with it. So, and it's a way for us to kind of honor our patrons. Some of them are our patrons, some of them are our fans who, can't back us for whatever reason, and we understand
Some
that.
of them are just friends that we've known forever.
Yeah, I mean, and it, we're not necessarily looking to make a lot of money. It would be great if we did, but our goal is to really encourage community. And one of the most important pieces of advice I ever got in writing was from my friend who's a journalist. Well, he's not a journalist right now, but he has been a journalist. That's what he went to. He's in journalism. And he read my pitch for the final step of RPG Superstar and said, he's like, I feel like there's something you want to put in here that you haven't. You need to step out of your way to do your best work, basically. He's like the only person standing between you and winning is you. And he was right. I had been second guessing myself on something and it never really felt right. And then I just went ahead and put it in. And it ended up being another NPC that kind of tied the story together in a way that I was very satisfied with. And while I don't know that was really what stood between me and winning, and beating the others, but it actually made it feel like a victory for me rather than just, like I had the best one. It actually felt like I'd done my best work rather than I won. And doing my best work was actually more important to me than. So really our live play is not very different, just fewer people.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We don't. Our Sunday game, we have 6 people at the table, and for the live stream, most of the time it's just the 3 of us.
Mm-hmm. Because of timing and stuff like that.
Like I said off camera before we started shooting this video, that I went back and watched most of your catalog on YouTube, and the one thing I appreciate the most about watching your guys' streams is how comfortable you guys are. It does give me the atmosphere and the feeling of I'm at home playing with you guys. It's a home game that just happens to be recorded, and that's something to be that I truly appreciate as a viewer. So for that, I want to say thank you. But I'm gonna lead to my question is what systems you think are best for streaming, and are those the same type of systems you like to play in your home game?
So right now I'm running Newman for our home game. Mm-hmm. I think that any game can be streamed. Mm-hmm. You can stream anything. I really like streaming Cypher because I don't have to worry about a map on the table. And I've yet to figure out how I'm going to get a camera to point at the map on the table. And we do want to try to stream some other games eventually, but at the moment, it really is that the narrative style games are probably our best bet. Partially because of setup, and partially because we could be using Roll20. I could do it on Roll20 and put that up on the live stream and have the map visible that way. But I'd rather not do that because that's yet another technology piece I have to be interacting with while I'm running. And I would prefer to just leave the technology alone and only watch what our chat is saying. That's enough distraction for me. So I like the idea of something that has less
moving parts.
I also like the fact that with Cypher, you're not dealing with a lot of mechanical moving parts in the game mechanics either that get in the way. Honestly, I do a lot of writing for Pathfinder. I would like to do some writing for some other games. I would like to do more writing for Cypher. I've done a little, but not as much as I would like to, which is part of what we've been talking about for Marlowe House too. We can get to that in a minute. But Cypher is one of my favorite games to run, hands down, because I'm not touching dice, which
dice
people don't understand. When you're running, I was like, I have to give up my dice, and I was very, very put off by that in the original pitch for Numenera. Sorry. If it weren't for the fact that Monty Cook had sold me so many times on so many other things,
Exactly.
that I'm not certain I like this. But then we actually sat down and played it, and I was like, I don't have to touch dice.
Yeah, Numenera.
This is awesome.
Numenera was the first game I ever like really ran. Like I said, I did run my scenario, but Numenera was the only game that I've really like just picked up a book and read it and run it in a convention, and then I run a different game in another 4 hours, and then I ran a different game the next day, and it was very like, because it didn't really. I don't know. I don't want to say this and it sound like I didn't read it, but like it didn't really matter what was written in the book, because if I couldn't remember, I just made something else up and nobody knew the wiser.
Honestly, that's not completely untrue, because the way they're written, you only need to know the shape of the story.
Yeah.
The shape of the story is the most important part.
You got to tell a story.
We have last year's Gen Con story. I had a total brain fart and forgot to sign up to run games for Monty Cook, for Gen Con, right? So when we went to the meet and greet, I was like, oh crap, I didn't sign up for anything. So it was literally the next day, they was like, hey, you want to run Numenera for us? So I took the book home. We actually went out for drinks. And then Saturday afternoon, I was running a Numenera game. I read the whole thing. I wrote my notes down. I sat down with the group, and then I put the book to the side. I said, okay, guys, I read this yesterday, but I know the shell of the story, but we're going to have a good time. Trust me. So I gave away the book to one of the players, and we had a great game of Numenera.
That's the first thing I always tell people when I sit down to GM is that I tell them that, I'll teach you the system.
Yeah.
I may not get the rules right. You may not get the rules right, but we will have a good time. And we have always had an amazing time. One of my favorite Gen Con stories was when Darcy and I, when there was only few tables and we were running like 1 hour after the other. And she was telling the same story I was telling, and someone had a different Cypher, and they ended up pulling this random item out of the bestiary, and suddenly she's talking about this tree growing in the middle of the city courtyard. It was the hideous game. And I'm like listening like with half an ear, and I'm like, where the hell was that in the book? I was like, what tree? I don't remember a tree in the book. I don't remember that in this story, but she's running the same game. So afterwards, I asked her, and it was, like every time you run the game, it is completely different. We've played the Skein of the Blackbone Bride like 3 or 4 times, and it is always different.
That's the beauty of the Cypher system.
That is one of my favorite modules. But I think my favorite GMing moment in Cypher at this point is this last year's Gen Con.
Mm-hmm.
They did not seat everybody on Sunday. They did not have enough people to play in every game on Sunday morning. And we were slotted to run separate tables. And they were able to seat one table for the 2 of us. And we co-GM'd Forgetting Doomsday.
I actually cried. It was because the game is set up so that there's 2 towns that come together.
That's the game I totally improv'd.
Yeah.
So Andrew took on the male leadership role, and I took on the female leadership role, and he told his town story, and then I told my town story. And then when they came together, we kind of we didn't completely GM independently.
We had run it independently once before, and so there were some scenes that both of us really liked. And so as we were getting ready and going into it, it was, she really liked this one scene. I really liked another scene, and we just kind of traded off on the ones that we liked. And then we got to the end, and I liked to ham it up a little. which you may have noticed. And so I did the grief steal, and I was hamming it up.
I mean, I think the other players were crying too. I mean, it was so sad. It was so sweet.
I couldn't see it. My head was down, and I was all mopey, and
like grown men on Sunday morning were crying. It was awesome.
I heard sniffles, and I was like,
But
"This is."
That was a great adventure, actually.
It was one of the best adventures ever.
Actually, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, after 2 adventures, I will run and play anything that Shauna writes.
Mm-hmm. She writes
the 2 Numenera adventures. I liked the one she did for Predation too, but the 2 Numenera ones particularly. My God.
I got a great story about the Predation one, but we'll talk about that after the video. I ran that the first year Predation was out, and it was amazing.
I have a picture of there was a frilled dinosaur or whatever. I forget what it was. And the guy who was playing it was really getting into it. Whenever they would talk, he would do these like wrestler moves, and he'd get like this, and he'd do this. It was hilarious because even without communicating with words, like he really got his point across. We laughed so hard. I think
because the 2 players you had were excellent.
Yeah, and it really encourages people to get into the characters more because they don't have to do their math. Like they're not worried about, what's the bonus for this and what do I subtract for that? I just get to be my character.
And that is the beauty of Cypher. Yeah, you get to really focus on, getting in that headspace rather than the math.
Right.
But now that we're talking about like stories and stuff, how do you guys come up with your video concepts? And do you guys have a favorite streamed game that you have done, or an episode or favorite moment that got captured on film or something like that?
So the way we've come up with our stream content has mostly been,
oh my God, what are we going to do on Friday night? So yeah, I think
that's a good chunk of it. But actually, I think that the thing I would say is that we have actually crowdsourced it at the table for the live streams that we've done. We came up with it. I gave everybody homework one week, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had to come to a game with homework." And I said, come up with a handful of ideas. I'm going to do the same thing, and we're going to kind of throw them in a hat and pull them at random and see what we end up with.
And that's how we ended up with Space Pirates, with baby dragons attached. That one was fun.
Scoundrels of a Stranger Sky. We ended up with time travel as an element, dragons as an element. And so we ended up in this like Sword and Planet space adventure that
is like Pirates of Darkwater, the gas giant.
Yeah. and so so a lot of it came from us talking to one another on camera. And while we're doing this, one of our viewers is sending me stuff already. He's like, and we could do this, and he started sending me information on planets the very next day.
Yeah, I mean, he created like most of the backdrop.
He gave me a half sheet spread of our solar system.
Nice.
I was like, this is awesome. Thank you, and that's what we ran with. And that was a lot of fun doing that.
The only thing that I can say with all certainty that we definitely planned out was Longest Night, which happened on the winter solstice.
Yes. And
that story was actually, I wrote that, and it was actually based on a dream. I woke up from a dream one night, and I saw 2 people walking, like down like a shady, lane, like a country lane. And a white globe rolled up on them, and one person was gone when the globe rolled past them. And I woke up and I'm like, I have to write this story. And I've had that story in my mind for about 2 or 3 years. And it had always been my plan to write it as a short story for Numenera. And then the solstice was actually going to be on a Friday night. And I'm like, nah, I'm just going to write it as an adventure. So I did. And we're going to play it. I won't lie. I don't think that it was the most dynamic storytelling I've ever done, because of the nature of it, and it was my first run at that game. I think if I had an opportunity to run it again, I think I would do some things differently. But it was
also an early stream.
It was an early stream, and so we were still kind of getting.
We've learned a lot since then.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
But I really like telling stories. I mean, like, I really like telling stories. I'm not a big fan of creating items or spells or like I'm a narrative type person, and that's the way I game. We LARPed Vampire for years, and I'm not kidding. I mean, if I had to get my character sheet out, I was dying because I'd obviously used up all of my charisma.
Yeah. And this is actually one of the other things you were asking about how we design together. I like stories too, but I am forever tinkering with rules.
Yes.
I am always looking at new ways to do things, looking at various mechanics and making different choices and seeing what kinds of things we can add, subtract, alter, and I spend an awful lot of time thinking about rules.
Nice.
So we complement one another very well. I understand the rules enough to be dangerous and to give constructive feedback, but not so much so that it's something that I perseverate on like some people I know.
Right.
Andrew's the dean of our group. Me and Al come up with some idea that Dean will make it happen for us rule-wise.
Right now, I'm working on 3 new character types that we're going to roll out when we get around to eventually doing our long run actual play that we probably won't film because one of our players for that prefers not to be on camera.
I'm saying though, if you guys want to do a CU game,
well,
I'm all up for that.
Before you say that, Anthony, because I do have a final question for them, but I'm going to add on to the end of that question.
Okay.
We're going to say it, but here. You've kind of given us a little bit of idea of what we have to look forward to for Marlowe House, because you're talking about, new types and things like that you may not share with us. But what do we have to look forward to in that vein? But I'm throwing this out there too. Wouldn't you guys love to do a game of GM roulette with us on Marlowe House?
I could be up for that.
I mean, I would be more willing to do it for Cypher system than I would other games because I know it.
Oh, that's what they do. So
I know,
it's all convenient.
I'm much more interested in that.
I think we need to make that happen because I think you guys would be. I think it would be awesome, not only to be able to play with you, but just to experience, the randomness and wildness of GM roulette with some, people. We really respect out there. So.
I'm much more disappointing than you realize, but okay.
I don't know about that.
I know that husband sigh. I do that several times a day. But what can we expect from Marlowe House going forward?
All right. So immediately we've got a couple of things. Tuesday, Sean K. Reynolds will be on. We're going to do that on our Insights and Inspirations stream, which is our Tuesday stream. I don't know what we're going to talk about with Sean.
It'll be a surprise for everybody.
It is going to be a surprise for everybody. I know we're going to talk. I've talked to him a little bit about some of the things that we can talk about, and we're gonna kind of play it by ear. I've got a few questions I'll probably ask him. I'm hoping to get some questions from our audience. So if anybody who is watching this,
great.
Knowing from experience, you don't need to write many questions down with Sean.
No, he's a storyteller. He's a storyteller, and I fully endorse that. We had a colossal problem of audio disasters on last Friday. And we had planned to have Nicholas Logue on, and Nick was there.
But he had
the audio
bronchitis
failed.
Of some kind.
He had some sort of he couldn't talk, and it's okay because I couldn't get his audio.
So we're gonna we're working on rescheduling him now that we think we've kind of figured out what the sound problem was.
Well, we haven't figured it out. It figured itself out.
Yeah.
I came in on
I was
Friday.
going to take credit for that.
I'm
I would have loved to have seen that. I would have loved to have seen that one.
So on Friday, I'm sitting there trying to figure out what's wrong. I'm fiddling with everything, beating on the computer. I'm ready to chuck something across the room. I'm really angry, and it's just not working. We got to the point where we broke out a phone and tried to mic a phone.
Yeah, I mean,
and his voice was so bad that miking the phone wasn't going to work.
Right.
And so really, it was probably better he didn't come on anyways, because health-wise, he just wasn't really in the right place for it. But come Tuesday, I fire up for Insight and Inspiration, and all of my audio worked. I have no idea.
That was the universe letting you know that Nick needed to rest. That's
right. That's exactly.
And so what we wanted to do for that one is I had already brought up improv, and this is again another way that Monica and I work together. So I did an Insight and Inspiration. I was talking about doing improv at your table because I've been in prep for our stuff. I started listening to an audiobook on improv. And I was like, well, this is some really great advice in here. It's not really written for gamers. Let me translate this to Game Table, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the stream. So I talked about it for a little bit. I go, after the stream's over, Monica says, Nick teaches acting.
And he did a seminar at PaizoCon about, we went to it. We sat in and watched him talk about improv, and yet Andrew didn't remember.
I forgot. It was I didn't put the two things together at quite the right time and place. But that's what we do for one another. We'll complete each other's broken thoughts. And so as soon as she's like that, I was like, oh. So I grabbed my phone.
I was
it's
like, why don't
many hours earlier in Hawaii. So it's the middle of the night where I am. It'll be plenty early. I text Nick, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great." So we weren't going to do like an interview where we talk about what he's doing or anything like that. We were just going to sit down and talk improv, and then we were going to get him to play an NPC at the table.
Nice.
Because
that would have been awesome.
Because as an NPC, I don't have to teach him the rules.
Yeah, because Cypher doesn't require the NPCs to know anything.
And at that, if there was, I told him if there was a moment where he wanted to roll dice, I would just crib some rules from animal companions and companion characters and let him roll a single d20. And so I said, bring a d20 if you really want to, but by and large, you won't need to know anything. We're just gonna improv. He's like, that sounds great. And so that's what we were gonna do. And then he was sick, and my sound went.
So our plan is to have him back on, and then
our plan is to have him back on in the future, and to have other people on to do
similar things
with probably the same game.
Yeah. So our plan is to make the
Legends of the Wild Wastes.
Yeah, Legends of the Wild Wastes
our guest show
will be like our serial, and so it'll our Scott's character, my character will journey through time, life and time and stuff like that. But then we'll have these, it'll be like the old 80s shows where the bad guy was always the guest star, or not, they're not always going to be the bad guy, but like the guest stars is always like in 4-color, and they move off of the show at the end of the day.
It's actually sort of the way I see it is sort of like a Wild West with anime mechs and magic version of In Plain Sight.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
that sounds fun.
They'll be doing like bodyguard missions and things like that, and these NPCs will have their own motivations and will go off and make their lives hell, or not. So they could be totally cooperative. We don't know.
And they'll be in charge of making some of their own like personalities and their characters and that. So we won't even know what's showing up to the table until we get there.
Yeah,
but it'll always be bad in a good way.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Those are kind of. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I honestly would not mind appearing in that role as like a guest NPC one time, or throw,
You
throw
know,
a wrench
that can
into the
probably be
works.
arranged. That can probably be arranged.
Yeah.
What's your regular scheduled airing time so our viewers know?
All right, so it is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard or Eastern Daylight, depending on which time of year it is, on Tuesdays and Fridays. And the Tuesday show tends to be a shorter show. The intent was that it would be half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, unless we have a guest, and then it's just up to how long the guest is willing to stick around.
Like tonight.
And then the Friday show is typically about 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, we try to run between 9 and midnight
Yeah.
because it does get, because most of us work. So about 11:30, you can tell as the episodes go on each night that we get like a little slower,
Or we
and
get
a little-
slap happy.
or really, yeah, it gets really goofy. Like that third episode is always
Right.
like a little dodgy, and
Because
I'm
I-
passing notes like bedtime.
You're a little punch drunk.
Yeah.
But for those, if you're watching them on YouTube, they actually get broken up. We break them up as if they were their own separate episodes.
So sometimes we remember at 11 o'clock to reintroduce ourselves, and sometimes we don't.
Sometimes it's a little weird.
Yeah. So watching
Again,
it in order is
there's
important.
so many things about streaming that we should know going in that we just keep forgetting and learning. We forget to talk about our Patreon or our Discord or all the different things that we have set up to do, our Facebook page. We forget like 90% of the time.
Right. It's a good thing I listen to public radio because, they do the fund drive. So I almost remember it more often than not.
Even when I have notes in front of me to tell me to do all the things, somehow we still manage to forget them.
Yeah. So
Don't worry. We're not going to forget to put all your links down below in our description.
thank you.
I promise you that. Look, it's right here on our notes.
Oh, we don't run with notes. You guys are much more advanced than we are. We just fly by the
I need
seat
to
of
get
our
on
pants.
that. We've done notes a handful of times. We had
Yeah.
Now that
that
we
might be the
got
only one.
now that we got all the easy questions out of the way, here's where we dig real deep. We want to find the hardest, the most thought-provoking questions we could possibly come up with. So these are our 9 rapid-fire questions. You guys ready for this?
I've studied. I'm good.
Question
Sure.
1: player or GM?
Player.
By choice,
Yeah.
GM by assignment.
All right, so pull punches or go for that TPK.
Pull punches.
Yeah. There was one specific time when TPK was the goal, and we still didn't manage to pull it off. I prefer to pull my punches
Online or in person?
In person.
in person.
I'll do online. I've enjoyed it, but in person.
Announce the difficulty number or keep it secret?
Both.
Yeah. It depends. It depends on who I'm gaming with.
If I'm at a con, I always announce the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
At the table for a game that I'm running, it's about 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. So, salty or sweet snacks at the gaming table?
We do cheese. What is that?
I got a
Salty?
savory salty.
What kind of cheese is it? Because it can also be sweet. There's sweet
Well,
cheeses.
that's it. We
Actually, it's either usually a veggie tray or an assortment of cheeses, which go from sweet to salty and then spicy.
yeah, the hot pepper
Okay.
gel, pepper jack.
Fancy spicy.
Although there's a lot of sweets that go around the table.
Yeah,
It's-
well, I mean we don't stop at one.
Why not all?
Yes, umami, sweet, sour.
Yeah, sounds good. So RP or combat, or you want to mix it up a little bit?
I tend to lean towards RP,
I prefer RP.
but mix it up.
I prefer RP because my dice betray me so frequently that combat is actually not. I mean, it is truly not fun for me most nights. It
But
becomes
you're running Cypher, so you don't have to worry about it.
well, it becomes very frustrating. I mean, I can't hit anything. I watch someone else destroy monsters single-handedly. I'm just like, this is no fun. Mostly RP.
PDFs or physical books?
My
Physical
God,
books.
physical books.
That was a quick answer. But
Andrew had some serious conviction in that answer.
All right. So one thing that you guys did not touch on that wouldn't have come up anyway. We are both former bookstore managers.
Mhm.
Oh,
okay, that makes
that
sense.
explains it.
I actually physically have a hard time engaging with electronic media. Like I can't read books on like a Kindle or on a iPhone or anything.
If it's
like
something where I can have both, I prefer to have both because I'll take them and use the digital reference. Sometimes I'll even highlight out bits of it and put it in my own notes, cut and paste.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, I engage much better with a physical book than I do the digital.
And it's nothing like opening up that gaming book for the first time.
Oh my God, there isn't.
Nothing
All right,
else
so,
like it.
so I've talked about this on my blog too. The very first thing I look at in a new RPG book is I flip to the back and I look at the character sheet.
Mhm.
First thing I look at.
Yeah, I believe
You
I'll
know,
go the one
you know how
Steven
hard
does
it
the
is to
same
flip to the back of the back of a PDF.
But speaking of the physical versus PDF, next question is pen and paper notes or digital?
Pen and paper usually because I retain much better things I write down.
I'm the reverse. I type things.
That's because your handwriting is so small and pain looking.
I know. I just do better when I can read it perfectly. I can't stand messy handwriting, and I can write really neatly for a while, and then it gets hard.
Well, in my job,
My
I
hand
actually
gets tired.
I have to take notes on a computer, on a laptop while I'm walking around and interviewing people. So they become very good at like the baby hold and typing with one hand. But I spend way too much time in front of a computer screen on a daily basis for me to want to look at a screen any longer than I have to.
Nice. So, with that being said, pre-written adventures or original content?
Mix.
Yeah. It depends on what it is.
Brilliant pre-written adventures that I think should not be missed. But I also really enjoy doing my own thing. Sometimes it's a matter of mixing and matching, even in the same adventure.
So around the yarn store that I go to, because I knit, they have made my name into a verb, because I don't even follow written knitting patterns the way they're written, because I invariably don't like something about it, and so they started talking about me when I wasn't there. They're like, so you're gonna Monica that pattern, right? And then you're gonna and so it came up on the Facebook page. They're like, here we are Monica-ing the hell out of this pattern, and they like had pictures of like things that they had altered and stuff like that. And I'm like, yep, that's how I do things. I just can't follow a pattern.
Ooh, but yeah, that wraps
That's
up our
hilarious.
rapid fire questions. That is super funny. It's always nice when a verb is assigned to your like name or whatever, and it's not a negative one. You know?
Right. Yeah.
It's like MacGyvering. I mean, I do MacGyver at the local yarn store. It's kind of awesome.
But yeah, so that was the rapid fire questions. Good job, guys. You guys did fabulous.
Thank you.
Oh yay, we got 100.
And yeah, so that wraps up our little talk.
You Monica the crap out of those questions.
Oh boy.
We did. I think most of us were both.
Yeah, we don't fall into your rules. I'm sorry, we just don't do that.
But
We're going to
yeah.
add that to our lexicon.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, talking with us, giving us that insight into your creative process, how you do things. It's been wonderful. Again, like Anthony said earlier, we'll be sure to add all your links that you mentioned down below, your Facebooks, your Twitters, or do you guys have individual Twitters, or you share one for the
Just
Marlowe House?
actually,
Or...
we have a Twitter handle somewhere.
we have there's a Marlowe House Twitter handle that gets almost no traffic.
Yeah,
we're bad. Because we're bad.
We got you. But again, we'll be sure to add that link to the bottom amongst the the Facebooks, the Twitch, all that other stuff, Patreon, all that. And thank you again, and thank you everyone for watching. Your viewers at home, you guys are awesome. And
yes, thank you.
And you guys at home, be sure to like, share, subscribe. The more we get the word out, the more we get to do these wonderful interviews and videos. And yeah, thank you so much. And any last parting words, guys?
I'm Monica Marlowe.
And I'm Andrew Marlowe.
Have a good night.
And,
what happened to This Is Marlowe House?
That's how we end our show.
and to piggyback off of that, from us at the CU, we will see you later.
Bye, guys.
Good night.